Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the First Class, Second Place podcast. I'm your host, Jason Enrique, and we got some very, very first-class guests up in here today. Now, before we do this, I want to remind everybody that I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the show. We got some subscribers up there on YouTube and checking out everywhere on all social media platforms and so on and so forth. So thank you very much. And with these guests over here, I thought that this is a very, very interesting topic to talk about today. And these three gentlemen have actually been First Class, Second Place alumni before, but I figured, you know what? These are the perfect gentlemen to talk about with this specific type of topic. So without further ado, let me introduce you. We got Carlos Villa over here across from me. We got Dennis Machado, and we also got Joel Fermetta. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Really appreciate you guys coming through here, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, let's get a little bit familiar again with you guys, since there may be some new people that may not are aware about, who you guys are, or they haven't seen old episodes yet. So, let's start off with you, Carlos. Let's basically, give us the summary about who you are real quick before we get to the other gentlemen.
Girl dad, five girls. Kept looking for the boy, but here we are. Husband, entrepreneur. I'm a financial coach, and living life. Thank you for having me here today, Jason. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Dennis.
Dennis Machado. I'm a certified behavior analyst. Worked in the field for about 17 years, treating the symptoms of autism all across ages from as young as 4 years old all the way up to 20. Also a father. Currently help manage a truck repair shop as a family business. And same thing, all around enthusiast of all things health.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me back.
It's a pleasure to have you guys back, every single one of you guys. And Joel, last but not least.
My name is Joel Fermetta.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an actor and a model. I was on episode 101.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me again. I feel so much pressure following with you guys.
No pressure, bro. You're good, man.
You do what you do.
You guys contribute so much to society, and I'm here just flashing my face.
No, you know what you do?
Camera.
You bring joy to people with your artistry on screen.
Yeah.
So that's what you do, bro.
Yeah, I'm a very big lover of the arts, and yeah, that's basically.
And let's not also forget that you're a veteran. You served this country as well. So first and foremost, thank you for your service.
Yes. You know what it is that happened so long ago, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes I need a reminder that.
It takes you to come on a podcast in order to get that reminder, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, again, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Now, the reason that I decided to have you three gentlemen specifically is because right now, it seems like mental health is the biggest topic everywhere, wherever you go, even if it's not just in podcasts, but we find it indoctrinated in the news and on other podcasts and even on some sports shows. There's always something to talk about. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this one's particular, because I feel like mental health is so broad nowadays that I feel like one of the things that kind of gets lost in the sauce is specifically for men. Because not to put anybody down, no genders or anything like that, but I noticed that ever since people have been really into the whole mental health aspect, the women have been, for better or worse, not for worse, but usually the spotlight is usually on them because naturally they have to go through a lot more than what we have to go through, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we go through it any less. We have tons of pressure that is put on us every single day. We also have past traumas. We're also trying to break generational curses. And, it's a lot of us still have that stigma where we're afraid to talk about these kind of things because we were taught at a very early age that this is not something that we talk about, especially on a huge platform. And I feel very humbled and honored by the audience that have actually thanked me for being so open and honest and vulnerable on my show and also other shows, that I just feel like it's important to spread the message. But I also feel like I'm not the only one that's doing this. I know that there's other people out there. So if I'm able to help people be open and be vulnerable as much as I can, then I feel like the world can be a better place. And I was actually on a podcast recently. Shout out to Marissa Tong from the Let's Just Be Real podcast. She had me on because she wanted to get, she had me on twice actually. The first time was she wanted to talk from a male's perspective about the mental health aspect. And then the second episode, she had me on to talk about, the gender wars as they call it, because the dating world is so messed up now and so on and so forth. There's so much insecurities and so much options. And luckily you gentlemen don't have to do that because you guys are happily married, you have beautiful families and so on and so forth. But somebody like me, somebody like Joel, somebody like a friend of mine, shout out to Dre, who's actually overseas in Syria fighting for our freedom right now. So, thank you so much for your service, brother.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I just feel like we all have, even though you gentlemen have never met each other up until now, I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of relatability when it comes to this topic specifically. And I just wanted to get your guys' take on it as well, because I feel like this is a topic that it's getting talked about, but we need to do a lot more than what's being done right now, because a lot of it just seems to get swept under the rug.
Right. I agree with you, man. You know, I was recently having a conversation with a friend of mine, and, you know, we were just talking about, you know, family growing up, how far we've come since we were young and dumb and full of you know what, running the streets. And, you know, mental health for men especially, I feel like there's not enough resources out there for us, right? You know, it's kind of like you said, it's a spotlight on the women, and there's more resources for them, whether that's through community centers or online or colleges, or, you know, I've seen a lot more programs for women, but especially for fathers and husbands, you know, we go through it, right? And I was raised like, oh, you know, boys don't cry, right? Men don't talk about their feelings. But now that I've matured, I've learned that's all BS.
Especially since we're all minorities, you know, especially like most of us are from the Hispanic community, where that's like forbidden. I remember there was a time where I was thinking about going to therapy, or even just doing the show in the beginning. And one of the first things that my family specifically told me that I hope it goes well for you, but whatever you do, don't talk about what goes on in the family. And I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of counterproductive, because what if some of my trauma and my generational curses are from my family? If I'm not supposed to talk about that, then how am I going to get cured, so to speak, or healed, better yet?
I feel like there's such a, you know, a distinct difference between, you know, and I can speak from my experience, from the expectations that my father had to live up to versus the expectations that I have to live up to. And I don't think they're more or less, I think they're different. I think in terms of the way that society projected the male role has changed tremendously, and I think we are that transitional generation. You know, I can remember a time, just like you're saying, my father, you know, his father had 4 or 5 brothers, that old school sort of, you know, very tough, show no emotion, never show emotion. You're always strong. You're always the leader, always the provider. And that's how he was raised, right? But at somewhere along the line, that softened. And I'm thankful for it, because, right, I'm a product of that. But I remember a point in time, you know, and I'm thinking back to 7, 8 years old, where, you know, seeing your father cry was unheard of.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd break down your whole view of what the reality was. And, you know, you fast forward 20 years later, and now, you know, no issues showing emotion, no issues communicating, you know, when you're sad, when, you know, anxious. I shouldn't say no issues. There's still some hesitancy. But I read somewhere, and I feel like that sort of lines up with what we talked about. I feel like we're the first generation, I'm saying to you because I know you're the father, but we're the first generation of men for whom it's expected that you spend time with your children, that you help be the provider at home as well, right? And I do think that adds a layer of responsibility, but I think it also offers an opportunity for men to be able to, like you were saying, Jay, open up. Like, you're not machines. We're human just as much as females, you know? And I think there is going to take some time. There's that gap there between the change in societal norms and all of the resources, all of the access sort of catching up. And I still think that, you know, there still is some pushback to that. I don't think that it's easily accepted.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of men out there. I've seen it on social media where they'll bash another man for sharing his feelings. Oh, you know, he's this or that. Let's just see. Oh, he's gay. Like, come on, man, that's ridiculous. You know, and it goes back to, you know, unhealed men raising boys that will be traumatized men. Right? And it's important that we open up.
Right. And, you know, you actually sent me something a while back on social media where it really hit home with me. So, unfortunately, there was a story of a man who actually took his own life. And before he did, he posted a video on his phone, and he was basically talking about the financial struggles that he's going through. He feels like he's drowning in debt. He's not getting any help from anybody. He doesn't have the support of his family, and so on and so forth. And the weight just became so overwhelming to him that, unfortunately, he felt like the only way to get out of it was to take his own life. And it's a sad story to see, and you could actually see the pain in the guy's face before he took his own life. But I think that's a message that's necessary to get out. Whereas there's people out there that think it's completely taboo. Like, why are you sharing that? And it's not even just with the men; it's also with the women, because women have been able to, especially in this day and age, in some ways, be stronger than men. And with that being said, we congratulate them for being able to get the strength and see the potential in them. But sometimes they also have those curses from their father, and it spills over to them, especially if they never had any sons, and then they become, for lack of a better term, the toxic men in this generation.
Well, here's the thing, though, and I think we have to clarify, is that a lot of people tend to see it as it's some sort of, like there has to be a comparison, right? Or
Right.
there has to be one side that is more susceptible to any sort of trauma or any, like, like us women, we endure this. You men don't have to do that much. Your dad, you don't do as much as the mom. Therefore, you don't know what it really is to kind of feel that struggle. So you don't really know what pain or what mental anguish really is. And what people don't know, that being a provider is just as heavy, you know?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people expect men to be as modern as what you were describing with emotion and stuff like that, but still have the old school mentality of, I still have to take it all. I have to take it upon myself to deliver, to make sure that nothing breaks. And I can relate to that. You know, a lot of times, like, you know, I'm a control freak with everything within my limits. And if something slips out of my control, it feels heavy, you know? And then back to how we were raised, you know, los hombres no lloran, right? Men don't cry, you know, to the point where, like, while you were being raised and being told that, it was kind of like in a ridicule fashion. Like, if you were, I remember as a little boy, like, I'd cry for something, and my mom, she loves me to death and stuff like that, but it was just normal in that culture, where it'd be like, come on, boys don't cry, girls cry, you know? And it's like, it's just tough to, like, kind of undo that when that's how you were wired. So
I mean, there was even a point, you know, where, you know, my father, God rest his soul, where I was really upset about something, and I was lashing out, and instead of actually figuring out what the hell the problem was, he would resort to that manly man trait that he's at, and he actually would call me, like, what are you being well, I can't say the word now, but, you know, G, you know, that spells out. And but you guys get what I'm trying to say. And that like, so not only am I not supposed to be in touch with my feelings, but now I also have to prove that I'm not this amorphous thing that this person thinks that I'm being, you know? And also we live in a time now where a lot of things are acceptable, but even though none of us are homosexuals, like, we would actually get chastised for that if we were doing something that's related or is research or is like, it felt like it wasn't manly enough.
Right.
And these are the things that we still have to break out of as well. And, you know, like I said, my father's no longer with us, but he is one gentleman that I feel like he would have certainly benefited from therapy. But he came from that old school mentality where he had so much in him, and you could tell that it was seeping out, but he was always on the defense. He was always on the defense. He never wanted to talk about it. And I feel like that's what ultimately took his life, along with, you know, the unhealthy habits that he lived in every single day. I mean, he was 66 years old. He didn't look his age. He looked like he was pretty healthy. He looked like he was in much better shape than me. He always used to joke around that, you know, with the lifestyle that you guys live, I'm probably going to outlive longer than you guys. And, you know, God had the other plans. But the point that I'm getting here is that I feel like if it was his time to go, it was his time to go. But I feel like he would have been a much happier person while he was still on earth if he actually confronted his problems. And I'll even give you an example. So maybe my family is not going to be happy that I share this, but it's my show. I don't give a shit. So, and it's my responsibility to tell the truth.
until mom pulls up.
Love you, Mom. She watches the show too. So yeah. But God damn, you made me lose my train of thought. Okay. I know we are. So my father, he was a good father, but he was a terrible husband. He was not a good husband to my mom at all. Like, he was that type of guy that he wanted to be married and have kids, but he also wanted to live the lifestyle that he had before he got married. You know, he felt like he has it all. You know, he has his own business. I got a wife, I got kids. Everything is going great for me. And so that brings in the toxicity that comes with a really bad husband. So fast forward to the time, sometime after they had been already long divorced, he was going through some really tough times. You know, he lost his business. He was dead broke. He was working at a shitty job that wasn't paying him well, and he was struggling where he was wondering how he's going to pay the rent. And I remember he was being so stressed out, and he said to me, "Man, your mother really ruined my life." And I'm thinking, well, dude, you're the one that actually caused her to leave. You didn't have to hit her. You didn't have to cheat on her. I wouldn't blame her for leaving for what you put her through, you know? So you're not taking accountability for what you did. And I feel like that's just an example of many other men that are out there like that are still kind of giving guys like us a bad name.
Right. You know, there's a lot of hurt little boys disguised as men nowadays, unfortunately, because of the trauma, because of what example they had at home, right? I guarantee you your dad didn't have a best example of a father and husband combination.
My
Maybe
father
he was a
didn't
good
even know
father.
his dad.
Look at that, right?
He was practically raised by his mom, my grandmother, and his siblings. His father was never in the picture.
Right. You know, that wounds boys.
Yeah.
You know, and they carry that into adulthood. I actually, back when I was maybe 35 or so, maybe like 6-7 years ago, I went to a men's boot camp, right? And through some exercises and some alone time and some prayer time, I realized that I had daddy issues, right? You never think of that as a man, like, oh, I have daddy issues. But I realized through this exercise, I'm like, man, I am super resentful towards my dad. And it took me back to a time when I was 12 years old. And I remember, like, for a whole year, here I'm about to share some, you know, I remember for a whole year, my dad was telling my sister and I, oh, you know, when you guys get out of school in June, we're going to go to Disney World. I'm like, great, you know, the whole year I'm excited, you know, and this is, I hadn't seen my dad in a long time. I saw him for 5 years, then I didn't see him for another 5 years. Saw him for 5 years, didn't see him so for a whole year, we're excited. May's around. I'm like, oh, Dad, I can't wait to go. Come June, he calls me like the day before, right? And he says, hey, you know, something happened. We're not going to be able to go to Disney World. I'm like, damn, you know, I was super disappointed. But I was like, all right, cool. You know, we used to go camping every July. So July comes around. I remember, you know, all my cousins, we used to go deep. I mean, it'll be like 30 of us back when I was still going around my father's side of the family. And, you know, I'm playing basketball with my cousin, 12 years old. Right, you know, crossed him over. I was kicking his ass, right? But Alex, what's up, man? And I remember he's like, hey, why didn't you and your sister come with us to Disney World? We were all there. I started crying. To this day, sometimes I still get a little bit emotional because I didn't realize that till 20 years later how it had affected me, right? And I remember making a promise that day when I was 12 years old. I said, if I ever have children, I'm going to be the best dad. And that's what I held on to. Later on, I learned that wasn't healthy as well, but that was my first, you know, and yeah, I remember I was crying, man. I called my mom all the way from Jersey. My stepdad came to pick us up in Connecticut, man. And I didn't see my dad again probably for like another 8 to 10 years after that.
Wait, but why didn't you feel like that was healthy? I'm curious. Did you feel like maybe you were like kind of like chasing?
Yeah, I felt like I was doing things to be a great dad, just to be a great dad, where it wasn't coming from the heart. Like, you know, I learned through being mentored that, yeah, it's a good idea in my mind. It did help propel me to become a better dad than mine. But I was holding on to a promise that a 12-year-old unhealed, hurt boy made at a moment where, you know, he was super vulnerable and hurt. So once I let go of that and I let God work on my heart, that's when I started realizing, oh, that's right. You know, now I'm doing things out of pure love. I'm in such a good place now because of the mentors I've had, because of these programs, right, that weren't really geared towards mental health, but they help, right? I mean, we all have something, whether it's working out, whether it's, you know, I mean, there's some unhealthy stuff too, you know, like digging yourself into work. But, you know, I'm thankful, man. I'm thankful for everything that I've learned, you know, and especially mental health, man. I've been in some dark places, right? Yeah. Never suicidal, but I've had suicidal thoughts, right? Yeah. You know?
Yeah, like there's moments, not to cut you off, but there's been moments where I did mention once before back in 2018 where I actually did attempt to take my own life, and luckily I didn't go through with it. But I haven't gone back to that dark place yet. and hopefully never again. But have been dark moments, especially I would even say in this past year, where I'm not thinking about doing it, but I have these thoughts in my head, like, what would happen if I just jumped from this top floor to here, or like I'm holding a knife, or what would happen if I just slid it through my wrist or something like that? How much would it bleed? How much would the rush be? I mean, all these dark thoughts that I shouldn't be having in my head, and it goes to show that I'm not all there mentally, and I don't know who to speak to because I don't want to be judged either. You know,
you shouldn't feel bad about that, brother, because regardless of how much we're walking in the light, there's always going to be a bad or a dark moment. Just don't stay there, right? You know, I think setting up like certain mental blocks, or I'm very visual, right? I teach my kids this all the time, where we have to compartmentalize those dark thoughts, right? Hey, oh my God, I want to bang my head against the wall as an example. I'm going to take this thought, I'm going to put it in a box, I'm going to put a bow on it, I'm going to put it in the corner of the room, and I'll come back and open up that box later and address it. I'm telling you, man, you know, dark times, dark moments, dark thoughts, they're going to creep up, man.
Right. And, you know, this is something that I feel like I've been afraid to even tell some of my friends, and I'll give you an example to kind of contextualize it. So let's say I'm with like 4 of my guy friends, and I'm in most cases not, I'm always the heavyset guys. Everybody else is like in great shape, they're athletic and so on and so forth. I'm not in the best shape of my at all. Like, I'm the least that's active in the group. And, you know, we'll go out and like we'll have drinks, we'll have fun, we'll meet girls and everything. And more often than not, I end up being the 3rd, 5th, 7th, or 9th wheel. And I feel like the odd man out. And there was also times where a friend of mine would be like, he would be a dick, and he would actually swoop in, or you know, take somebody that I had an interest in, not just trying to smash, but like an actual interest in. Yeah. So, but the thing is that carries over into my life, where like there's been moments even as of like in the last couple of years where I look at myself in the mirror and I just think I'm just an ugly fat piece of shit. And
dude, that's a lie, bro. Honestly, look, you're a handsome looking dude, man. You're good looking
and
dude,
I appreciate that, but that doesn't like. But the point that I'm getting at is that these are thoughts that still creep into men's minds. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that feels this way, but nobody wants to, you know, come out and say it.
It's the same thing. Look, and I tell this to my kids all the time, because I'm hearing you speak and I'm living it. Like I know that, right? And what I always tell my kids is, look, we all have our insecurities. I don't care who you are.
For sure.
I don't care who you are. Yeah. You can be this good-looking mofo, right? But everybody's got their insecurities, right? And what I tell my kids all the time is, look, the difference between those kids that you can tell are living their insecurities versus the ones that you can't is just that one is better at hiding it than the other.
Very true.
Yeah.
And the last time we talked, I talked a little bit about how we essentially are a product of our environment. Right?
Yes.
And I want to dig into that a little bit, right?
Sure.
What I mean by that is every single experience that you've had since the day you were born has led you to who you are today. And who you are, I don't mean in the general term, in the way that I feel like so many people talk about, oh, that's him, that's his personality.
Oh, get that all the time.
I have a hard time swallowing that, because the reality is the consequences that you contact throughout your life shape you, right? So every conversation, every look, every smile, every frown, every perception, even if a look isn't directed at you, but the way you perceive the interaction is going to shape you in one way or another, right? That's a consequence. And if you can trace back every one of, now think about it, you're having hundreds of thousands of these every day, right?
Sure.
And you're going to be, how old are you? 30?
I'll be 38 next week.
Think about that. Across the lifespan, that's a lot of experiences that are, many of which are unfiltered. You have no control over. Right. And so when you think about, and we were talking about this earlier about, you know, our parents and sort of the things that they lived through, you start to see, wait a minute, there's a lot of room for error and a lot of room for establishing these repertoires that are unhealthy for us. Right. And finding that balance between what you recognize is impacting you and the things that are impacting you that you don't even realize is incredibly difficult, right? I feel like, especially now in today's society, you go on social media, you look at the news, you talk to your friends. I feel like there's such a push to live in the black and white. There's a right and there's a wrong.
Right.
And the reality is very few things exist in those extremes, right? On that continuum, the majority of things are here in the very weird gray area. And it's hard for us to be able to pick those apart. And I feel like when people like you who are trying to live heavily in that gray area, trying to, right, choose the right path day in and day out,
Heavy lies the crown when you try to do that.
That's what I'm trying to. There's a lot of consequences pushing you away from that because it's difficult, right? Because you're putting the responsibility of your feelings and of the way that you perceive the world and others on yourself. And when you do that, I think it's easy for people to assume, wait a minute, you're expecting me to do this too? No, it's easier for me to point the finger. I'm angry because this guy cut me off. It's funny. So me and our associates, we have conversations frequently, while we're at work and there's a little bit of downtime. And I always tell them, I always say, look, the latest sort of challenge that I have for myself is getting to a place where I'm on Route 21 and I know that there's this guy that's wanting to go on the left lane only and cut in front of me. And not only not react, but I want to get to the place where I don't care.
That's
because
good.
I don't know what reality he's living. Not that I let him cut, because I'm there. At
Right,
this point, I'm backing off. I'm there. I'm good. But the next level is, how do I get this angry feeling that I just want to pull him over and smack him across the head, right? And to
I was
me,
about to say you're better than I am.
well, I want listen, that's the same response I get. That's the same response. No, I'm not letting him cut up. But I even want to say the next one, which is, I'm responsible for my feeling. This, what I'm experiencing right now, that's on me, right? This person is probably living their own reality. Could care less about what I'm experiencing, right? So to me, and that's what I was trying to get at, is it's so hard to get to a place where you truly own the fact that you are the only person who is responsible for your feelings, right?
True.
For things that you're experiencing. It's your experience. But the way I see it, and call me a romantic, but I see that as a huge power. Like, wait a minute, I can turn all this off now. It's not easy, right? Because
Easier said than done. Yeah.
I'm 42 years deep into being, conditioned to think the other way.
Right.
But the minute you start to realize that, it's like, okay, wait a minute, this person is going through whatever they're going through, right? And if I think back about, wow, the reason I was in a bad mood this morning was because, my alarm didn't go off, I was late to my workout, or I didn't get breakfast. There's all these reasons that I'm angry. So what are the reasons that this person's angry? And the minute that I can disconnect my emotions from whatever this person is going through, that feels powerful. Now, I'm not saying that I'm there yet. It's a work in progress. But I feel like when you take that perspective, right, and then you think about your past, right, even just what you guys shared, man, that, first of all, thank you for sharing that. That makes me feel extremely important, and I'm appreciative of that, because I don't think that's an easy thing to do, to get to a place where you expose yourself and let yourself be vulnerable. But I think that goes back to what I'm talking about. You're taking ownership for your own feelings and saying, no, I own this, regardless of what others think. And I know it's hard to get to that place where you don't care, because the reality is we do care. I care.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's step one in saying, well, let me put it out there and just see what kind of consequences, eye contact. Now, look, from a behavioral perspective, whether you want to agree to it or not, the reality is if your behavior keeps being punished, you're gonna stop doing it. It's like wearing a shoe that is fly as hell, right? Looks awesome, but it keeps digging into your heel. You walk enough in them, you might not even realize that this is why you're doing, but you're gonna wear them less and less, right? Your body is programmed to react to that kind of punishment, if you will.
Right.
It's the same socially. If you're trying to have a conversation with someone and they're constantly looking at their watch, chances are you're gonna cut that conversation short, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna pick up on that cue, right? That's punitive.
Yeah.
Now, if they're looking at you, they're nodding, they're smiling, you're more likely to continue to engage, right? So all these consequences end up shaping up repertoires that not just become how you behave, but they impact how you feel, right? We tend to think that, well, I did this because I felt like it. When, I want to offer the following, which is you do something enough times and then you start to feel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start doing it because that's how you feel, right? If I know that it feels like I'm talking a little bit in circles, but let's say you go to a restaurant, you try a new dish. That dish was good.
Yeah.
Next time you go, you're more likely to try another new dish, right? But you try another dish and that dish is wacky. Like, I'm gonna stick to what I know works,
Yeah.
right? So the what you start to learn is that, wait a minute, varying up my behavior sometimes gets me something that's preferable.
It was benefit.
Or beneficial, exactly. And I know it seems like distant from what we were talking about, but there is a lot, and I can speak personally. I know that's what I work on, and I think what helps me get to a place of balance
Right.
is feeling like, I'm gonna try this because I know I haven't, and everything's sort of pushing me in the right direction, but I'm gonna take a leap. And when I contact something that's all of a sudden, preferable, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that worked. So I'm more likely then to take another risk the next time. It's not easy, right? But I think that ties into what you were talking about, which is I need to talk to someone. I need to, talk about my insecurities. I need to talk about the things that are haunting me, if you will.
Mhm.
And hopefully what you find is that the talking, right, offers you some safe space that says, wait a minute, it's okay because everybody is insecure.
Right.
Right.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And another thing too, like, because there's one thing that you said before with the insecurity. It sounds like your boy might have been more insecure than you were.
Oh yeah.
And-
I've come to realize that.
Yeah,
but
for him to want to pursue something that you want, to then prove to himself that he could take it from you, proves that he was probably way more damaged than you could have ever been.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could tell you guys another story where I knew somebody where this is a guy that he was just banging girls left and right. I don't know how he was able to do it, but he was able to. He needs a hard drive to figure out how many numbers of women he had.
Probably promising free makeup or something.
Yeah, but the thing is that I kind of come back to a time in his life because we've known each other for years where he was madly in love with this girl and he thought that this is the one, I'm gonna marry this girl, so on and so forth. Then, long story short, she just ditched him out of nowhere. Like, he just woke up one day, the sun was shining, the flowers were blooming, the birds were singing, and so on and so forth. And then she just dropped the bomb on him, yeah, this is not going to work. I'm breaking up with you. And I feel like instead of actually dealing with his demons and figuring out or what he may have done, or basically just working better on himself, he was filling that void by banging other women. And he just kept on doing it because I don't think he ever got over that. Because even though he was talking and bragging about all these women that he was banging, he still would go back to the time when that girl broke his heart. So that's a trauma that he never fixed. And it's not true what they always say. There's no that was his addiction. He wasn't doing drugs. He wasn't doing alcohol. Thank God. But that was his way of getting over or trying to get over something that clearly he is still not healed from.
You know what? Can I speak on that? Because I can relate to that. I know you want me to speak about military stuff, but
No. Listen, I was just basically describing where you come from, your background, and so on and so forth. But please, just
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, everybody here is a stud, especially come on, bro. That hair. Come on, bro.
I see my hair, and I challenge your beard.
It's like Pokemon cards, bro.
Special power.
But I too found myself in that position where I actually had a girl crush me during boot camp, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this girl.
She served with you as well?
She actually served before me.
Okay.
Right? I'm going to share a little bit too, because, it was actually super humiliating, and it kind of planted a seed in me where it was like, yo, I'm never going to let that happen again. Nobody's going to get the best of me ever again. She actually got me to go into the military. This was when cell phones weren't really that crazy, they weren't really that out. I think sidekicks are still, in style. So we had to use pay phones, and it was like prison, man. You'd get one call a week, it was like a lot of restriction. So we had to rely on letters, and the letters would start off with, "Oh, babe, I love you, can't wait to see you," to, "Babe, by the way, everything's fine," to, "Hey, Joel, hope you're good," to no letters at all. And family day came. My mom, she's ill. Jason knows, I mentioned in the last, so she couldn't make it down to down south where I was stationed. So this girl was supposed to show, and I called her to see where she was on my, handy dandy, payphone. And I heard another guy in the background, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm coming down." So it turns out she dropped off this guy in North Carolina, showed up to family day,
Wow.
right? Let me introduce her to everybody, all these battle buddies that I made friends with, and broke up with me and told me that she wasn't gonna, So that created a beast, that from there, it was like, I felt like, all right, it's a gender versus gender thing, the vicious cycle, all right, I'm gonna play them before they play me.
Right.
And then, but then it was a spiral that, because I didn't identify it as a depression, it was a void that I couldn't fill, and it was always like, nah, I gotta be the biggest player, because you know what? something else in bad culture. What do I think Bad Bunny has that song Titi Me Preguntó, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
because what do aunts always ask you, like, oh, how many girlfriends you got? And you're just like, come on, Titi, you know I got a couple, you know. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So like after a while, like it kind of felt it felt like you were in the cool crowd to have multiple partners or multiple people, and until you defeat that insecurity, you see that that's really not the case.
Right.
You know, like you guys can attest to this. Like when you find that one person and you can commit to them, you know, that's how you know, like, yo, like I'm healed from that. But that's definitely like from your boy, like I mean, I'm pretty sure I speak for everybody here. That's whack, man. Like your boy's whack. Like I wouldn't even call him my boy, you know, because it's just not your boy who went through the whole bang fest. I'm talking about the one who, like, you know, tried to do that whole stuff. That stuck with me, man. But yeah, definitely something that I feel that I went through that it took a lot for me to learn, you know. And I even went through this thing where like I cheated a lot, you know, and I always thought like, you know what, you're not going to take care of me, somebody else will, you know. Another thing that you learn from Hispanic culture growing up,
Right.
And until it happened to me, and then I was like, man, this hurts, you know. And then you start seeing like, wow, like, you know, there's two sides to a coin.
Right.
So,
And look, human relationships in general are difficult. If you're gonna have a successful relationship with another human, there's a lot of give and take. And you know, you can speak to being married.
Absolutely.
You know, I love my wife.
There's battles.
We have to work hard, and you know, across every element of life, right? Look, you're still gonna have people who are of the opposite gender that you're gonna be jealous about, or they're gonna be jealous about. You have to work at that, and you know, I do think, like we were just talking about before, those battles you have to recognize, you know, that again, it's my emotion. Why am I having these emotions? And being in that position, be having those conversations, you know. But I think that generalizes across the board. And I think, like Joel was saying about your friend, there's some other issues, there's some other aspects there that I think he's needing help with as well, that I think are coming across in how he's treating people who he calls his friends, that I think reflect more on him than necessarily on you. But it goes back to what we were talking about, right? It's difficult for us to detach ourselves from that because we have a tendency to look at ourselves. Well, where did I fit in this? Where am I in the wrong in this?
Yeah. You know, one thing that has actually really helped me out is the fact that it all ties into leaving the past behind, because I've mentioned plenty of times on this show and to other people that I know that in my 20s, I would say like from my early to mid 20s, I was extremely toxic. I was extremely negative. I was not a joy to be around. And little did I know that I was actually lashing out into the world. And a lot of it had to do with the problems that I had with my father. Like me and him being under the same roof, it was spilling into my everyday life, all the shit that we were going through. And I could see that now in hindsight, I could see why people kept their distance from me and so on and so forth. But I noticed it. And then afterwards, I'm still a work in progress. I'm a hell of a lot better than I was back then. But there's people that are still from your past that they're just never going to see the change in you. They're just going to, they're always, that first impression, that's always going to stick with them. So as probably my biggest mistake was trying to convince them and turn their, opinion of me. And you just realize that that's a battle you're not going to win, you know? So I just decided to, you know what, I'm not even going to focus on that energy anymore because it's draining me. It's draining all this positivity that I'm trying to, express. And it's in turn is actually ironically making me back into that other person that they remember me as. So all in all, what I'm trying to get to is that those people remember me as the past me. Well, then they should stay in my past as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a really good brother of mine, good friend who, he's definitely, getting to his true self where he should be at, healing and all that. But, maybe some family members or old friends still think of him as the old him, right? That's why it's important to talk about this, right? Because if he didn't have someone who he can talk to, other brothers, I always say iron sharpens iron, right? If we're not talking about these things, how are we expecting to grow, right? How are we expecting to leave that, right? You eventually had to talk to some people to come to the realization that, you know what? Those people still know the old me. I'm going to leave them in the past, right? Had you never had that conversation with anyone, I don't think you would have came to that conclusion. right? So it's important for men to talk, right? I mean, I have boys who call me and, you know, I don't know, we just, iron sharpens iron, man. We just talk about stuff.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy is how does your brother grow if he's always reminded on like his flaws when he was back then?
Listen, if you think about any addiction, right? You think about the 7-step program and whatnot, right? The first thing that people do to essentially break that connection is they pull them from the environment. Because, right, if you think about an alcoholic won't step foot inside a bar, right? And I hate to keep coming back to the behavioral part, but there's a behavioral explanation for that, which is the environment plays a huge role on occasioning how you behave, right? You walk into a church and immediately you're solemn, you're speaking softer, you're keeping your head down, right? Nobody's telling you to do that, but across your life, you've learned that this is how I should behave, right?
Yeah.
Now you think about it. You go into a bar, all of a sudden you're yelling, you know, you're saying things that you wouldn't say in a church, right? And that's powerful. And I don't know that that's always obvious to people, right? The environment that you're in has a lot to do with how you behave, right? And the behavioral choices that you have. So when I hear you talking about, you know, people have a hard time letting go of who I was in the past, well, they're part of your old repertoire, right? You just don't fit there anymore.
Right.
And so I'm almost, I'm surprised that you're not having a harder time going back to being that person that you were, because there's so many cues in the environment that say, this is how you should behave when you're in this environment. We see it with family, right? Families that have very difficult relationships to manage. You don't recognize the person. It's like, wait a minute, you're someone at work, and then when I see you with your family, completely different, right? Because those are the repertoires that have been shaped, right? That people have learned, this is how I survive, or this is how I thrive, is being this person in this environment. But in this environment, I'm somebody different. And some people, oh, but you're fake. It's not that you're fake. That's the person that the environment shaped you to be under those conditions, right? But it's so hard to see because it's automatic.
Yeah.
Right. And you test it next time. Walk with somebody just into a church. Don't say anything and just keep an eye on how they were, 10 steps outside, and then how their behavior changes. And you don't have to say anything. The environment is so powerful. Yeah. And the same thing, I challenge you guys. The next time you're in a family event, and somebody that you have access to outside of that event, just pay a little bit closer attention to their behaviors, the things that they say, the things that they do. It's incredible how potent the cues of the environment are at, occasioning how we respond.
It's like when you run into like an old friend from like your childhood, your talk changes.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
son. That's not proper etiquette,
Exactly. You just came out of a boardroom and all of a sudden, like, fly swag. Yeah. But that's but it's hard to see that, right? And I go back to what we were talking about. It's so easy to then say, wow, who am I? I'm so fake. No, that's part of what it means to be human, right? Some of this is we're genetically predispositioned to learn some of these things because it's what you need to be able to survive. Right. And socially, if you don't have social skills nowadays, and I get it, social media is not helping a lot of that either, right? But if you don't have social skills, right, what people call the soft skills, God, it's a difficult world to live in.
And that's a nice segue, because what I wanted to get into real quick, since we have a little bit more time left, is I think we could become in agreement that social media, for better or worse, is affecting all of our mental health. It doesn't matter if you're a man, it doesn't matter if you're a woman. It's just, we all know that it's fake. We all know that it's not real life. You can have a family that's, taking pictures of like the perfect family with their kids and their pajamas during Christmas and so on and so forth. But in reality, she could be fucking driving up on a wall. They're arguing back and forth. The kids are actually seeing the fights that are going on between them, this, that, and the third. You don't know what this guy's going through in his work life, so on and so forth. So I feel like we focus too much, and that was actually a problem of mine also. I'll be honest with you, the only time I'm really on social media these days is because I have a podcast called First Class Second Place. Other than that, I probably wouldn't even give it the time of day. But there was a point in my life where I was so indoctrinated, I was so addicted to it, that I actually thought that this was real life, and seeing everybody else seemingly do better in life than me, it took a lot out of me, and I felt like that affected my self-esteem dramatically. And at the same time, I got nobody to talk to, because who's going to listen to me and who wants to deal with my bullshit? It's my thought process.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
so social media, man, it could be a powerful tool or the devil, man.
Yeah.
You know, I saw this documentary on Netflix, and it linked social media to teen and preteen suicide. Like they showed the numbers when social media started blowing up. You saw the graph of child and teen suicide go up, and these kids, not only do they bully each other, not only do God, man, I've heard stories about grown men grooming these girls online, like as young as 10, 11, 12 years old, and literally going to go pick them up, right? Social media, it causes a lot of comparison, right?
Yeah.
I say this all the time, man. Comparison is the thief of all joy, right? You start looking, oh, look at that picturesque family, and like you said, right, with the pajamas and you don't know what's going on behind the picture.
It's like marketing. Yeah.
It really is, right? They only show the highlights.
Yep.
It's like when you pull up the highlights of your favorite athlete,
It's a highlight reel.
it's a highlight reel. It's a
Yeah.
highlight reel of that guy, of that girl,
It's like when
of
you
that
see a
family.
burger on like on a Wendy's ad, but then
Right.
you go to Wendy's and it's like
It's trash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So compare like the milkshakes. It's actually glue, so it looks
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a highlight reel.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the same thing. Like, I think like you said, it has so much potential to be such a good tool. Right. It's giving everybody a voice. Everybody can now express themselves in a way that reaches so many people. It gives you an opportunity to connect with people so much directly. But I think like anything else, right, it's got the potential for both. I don't know if you guys saw Oppenheimer.
I love Oppenheimer.
right.
Great movie.
Great movie.
There's so much that applies to those kind of situations, right? Every technology that's come and been disruptive always has the potential to make the world better.
Yeah. And what's interesting that you bring about Oppenheimer is obviously he was known as this brilliant person, and he was very popular amongst the world with politics and so on and so forth. But he was also a flawed human being. I mean, he was happily married, but he still couldn't stop cheating on her. He still kept on going back to somebody that was an old flame in his life, and he just couldn't get rid of that life. He was a chain smoker, so he was a disturbed person. But meanwhile, everybody's just praising him because he just helped save the country.
Right.
I love how you say
feel
it like it's a small task. You saved the world, huh?
I think one thing that leads to these moments of where you're like down on yourself is because you think that next man doesn't have a problem, right? I was having a conversation with my pastor not too long ago, and he's like a happy-go-lucky guy. I love him. Shout out Pastor John, love you, man. And we were having a conversation. I was telling him about some issues, and then I said something like, "Man, you must have no issues. You're always like a happy-go-lucky. You're just full with love and joy." And he just started cracking up. He's like, "You think I have no issues?" Right? We look at these people in high places, or they're wealthy, or they're super buff, or whatever the case may be, and we think, "Oh, this person, I wish I had his life." But if all of us were to throw all of our problems in the pile, guess what? We're going to walk away with our own problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
But we have to realize that, listen, everybody has issues, bro. Whether it's Oppenheimer or Aaron
Jose,
Rodgers.
yeah.
Like
Right.
we were saying, right? I tell my kids, listen, the difference between you and that popular kid is he's better at hiding his insecurities. Period. And it's the same
Wow.
thing.
Drop a bomb on that one.
Right.
Only difference.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to my kids, but I think that applies to all of us.
Yeah.
Right.
All of us,
Yeah.
and same thing. Like I always talk about maybe the last 15 years of my life, and big shout out to Somerset Hills Learning Institute. That's where I practice behavior analysis. That's where I got groomed. It's where I picked up so much of my current perspective on life. It's changed everything in how I see the world. And the insecurities that we talk about, God, if I had known what I knew today in high school, it would have been. And I enjoyed high school, so I don't want to make it seem like I was miserable.
school
That
was
wasn't
fun.
the case. But I would have enjoyed it so much more because I would see the people for the people and not for the persona, right? Or the images that
Right.
I make in my head about who this person is. And like I said, I would take more responsibility for my feelings because so much of it. So much of whatever I perceived as being, my insecurities or things that I didn't want to do because that's not just something I would do, was me.
Now, since we have a little bit of time left, let's try to switch up on a positive note for a little bit. So we've all spoken about our past traumas and what our experiences and so on and so forth. And, you know, I would say that we got a lot of good things that are going on for us right now in our daily lives, but we're still a work in progress. Now, we realize our traumas, we realize our errors, you know, we're all human and so on and so forth. So I'll start off with you, Carlos. So you know your past and you know what you've gone through and so on and so forth, and you seem to be thriving in a lot of ways. What do you do personally for yourself when you go every now and then to those dark moments and you got to get yourself out of it?
It's funny. Yeah, I tell my kids this all the time. Have an attitude of gratitude, man. You know, once I start going into those dark mindsets or dark places, I start thinking of the light, like what's going on that's good and positive in my life. My kids are healthy. I'm healthy, right? Listen, man, I've been homeless. I was homeless for like 11 months. So I've been in like super dark places in my life, right? But that's what I do, man. I just start thinking about what is going on in my life that's positive. What can I smile about? What can I thank God about? What am I grateful for? Because that, you know, light eliminates dark. You know, love trumps hate, right? So I start thinking of those things that warm my heart, whether it's my kids or my relationships or my family. And I just start thinking about each individual person in my life that I care about the most. And you know, listen, man, if you're going through some stuff, anybody here, anybody that's watching, you know, you're loved, man. You're needed. You know, people love you. People look up to you. You know, you're important. You know, you're loved, man. You have to start, you know, it's kind of like working out, right? But working out for the mental health, right? So, you know, I like to read. I like to listen. And that's where I go, man. I just go towards what am I grateful for? What do I love, right? And start reminding myself, like, man, I'm freaking important. Right? Whatever that dark thing is, right? That's a lie. That's a lie. Because life will beat you down, man. Life will beat you up, throw you down, right? And we have to make that decision. We have a choice. Are you going to stay in that, or are you going to dig yourself out? So those are just some of my tools that I use to dig myself out of those, you know, dark times.
Dennis, same question.
Yeah, I mean, you can't skip over that. I think, you know, he got it. But I think that there's another element too, and a lot of times, certainly when I'm questioning or feeling like, oh man, I'm not really sure what step to take. And it's funny, I had this conversation with my kids the other day, and not just my kids and my wife, where I look at our reality, right? We're essentially this organic matter on a ball of dirt, you know, traveling
Literally,
through
yeah.
the universe, right? Hundreds of thousands of miles per hour, circling this crazy ball of nuclear energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is all a game. You know, and again, I don't want to be negative, but this was the exact quote that I told my family, because we're making some tough decisions, and, you know, I could see a lot of worry, I could see a lot of anxiety. And I said, look, guys, I'm going to ruin it for you. In the end, we all die.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that seems grim, but to me, that felt liberating. Like, I know where this is going. So whatever happens between now and then, we get to decide. And we're here now, right? And like you said, like, the four of us are sitting at the table. We have our family, we have our health, we have a roof over our heads, we have jobs. There's so much to celebrate, and we know what the ending is.
Yeah.
So what are we afraid of? And I know sometimes that seems a little too rosy, right? I understand that there's other things that influence it.
Right.
But you know, it's one of those things, and not to cut you off, but it's like you say, what we all say, it's easier said than done. We know what the answers are within us. It's just actually putting those
Taking
actions
that
into
step.
works. Yes.
And look, it's baby steps, right?
Yeah.
Just like you were saying with working out, you're not going to go into the gym and, you know, bench press 300 pounds or squat 500. It's not going to happen, right?
Right.
But if you keep showing up, right, you do a squat of just the bar, you just do air squats, and you build. And it's the same thing with you know, your perspective and being able to recognize that you have control over your emotions. And so, like you were saying, figure out what they are, figure out how to work them out. And I think that's empowering.
Yeah. Joel?
Well, I feel that remembering where you came from, and also appreciate, like because some people think that growth means forgetting what you went through, or kind of being able to kind of stuff it as good as you can, or just bury it. But I feel that it's important to be able to kind of see what got you to that final result. Well, it's not a final result because we're always moving, you know. But you know, I feel that all that stuff that I went through put me in a position that I just learned more about myself, you know, and I paid attention to myself. So now, for example, one thing that I learned is that sometimes I could be a little pessimistic, and I used to say I was being real. You know, like, oh yeah, I probably can't do that, but you know what? I got to change this.
That's 25-year-old Jay speaking right there.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, like, I learned that is something that can come about from me. So now I have to control my mindset and be like, all right, how do I overcome that? Do I just sit there, even if I don't believe that I can do it? I have to find a way to still try and do it. For example, as an actor, sometimes, you know, we can find it. Well, obviously, we're in front of a camera. And, you know, there's sometimes a lot of pressure. Sometimes there's a lot of people in the room. And, you know, I learned that I had that extra gear that when I'm nervous, there was a short time where I was public speaking. And there was I realized at that point when I was in front of like 100 people that when I was starting to choke on my words, I snapped into a different gear and I just sucked it all up. And I noticed, all right, this is how I can combat that. Joel, you're not going to beat you. You know, you're going to be able to go through this. So accountability is one thing, you know, just being okay with the fact that you're not perfect and just learning on how to correct that for the future, you know. And I feel like that is who I am now. Like I know that I made mistakes. I know that at some point I wasn't the greatest person, but I know that I can be a really good person, and I can be a better version of myself every day, man. As cliche as that sounds, as tacky as it sounds, you know,
it's not because listen, we know that these are the things ultimately in our heads. You know, we know the answers are right in front of us. It's just you know, some of us are better at contextualizing it with actions better than others. But I really truly believe that potential is in everybody. We just got to find it, or it's.
I'm sorry, but
no, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. But what I wanted to say was, because you guys were dropping some dimes, so I didn't want to interject. But two things.
Don't be pessimistic, bro.
Yeah,
you're falling into that.
You know, that's me. Joel, stop it. But two things that you guys kind of made me think of was one thing that I learned as well is that you can't control anybody's perception, which kind of goes in hand with a healthier mindset, where you can't control what you're going to think of me or what you're going to think of me. I have to focus on how I'm going to be and how that can be a better situation for me. Not in an egotistical way, but in just how do I become better, a better functioning person.
Be true to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't control what you think of me, and that kind of helps with the pessimism, right? Now, the other thing I was going to say is, you know, I learned very recently, I'm not going to let anybody tell me who I am. Somebody, again, with perception, you can tell me, oh, you're the worst person ever. I'm sorry, but you may think that, but my mom thinks I'm the best person ever. She thinks that for a reason, you know? Right. So
I'm not pretty, but my mom thinks I'm handsome.
Exactly. Yeah. You know? So, you know, it's those are two things that, you know, you guys were dropping some really good points, and it just like triggered something in my mind. But and then that's basically what pieces me together.
I'm going to tell you something right now that you told me the last time you were on my show. I think in some cases you're selling yourself a little bit short. So I'm actually throwing that same energy back to you. Don't sell yourself short, bro. You got a lot of things that are going on for you. You have made it. You served our country, which is something that I don't think I have the balls to do. You've been able to take care of the most important woman in the world, your mother. You've been able to put a roof over your head. You've been staying steady with your work and your passion and so on and so forth. You are actually taking risks with your acting career, as opposed to just sitting, you know, being settled with a 9-to-5 and being miserable. You were actually chasing something that you know you want. So you got to give yourself a little bit of credit there, my man. And that actually is a nice segue, because for me, that's my thing. For me, is giving myself more credit than I really do, because I tend to focus on what I didn't do as opposed to what I do or I am doing. And, you know, there may be some naysayers out there, whether it's like people that think they could do a better job than me or my former co-host or anything like that. And I got to take the time for myself. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm doing something that these motherfuckers can't do. and I don't mean to be crass or like rude or like, you know, so direct, but that's my thought process.
Samuel Jackson would be proud, bro.
Samuel Jackson, be proud.
That was the energy.
Thank you. But no, it's all about just taking the time to reflect on what I have done, because I said before, I worked on myself. I'm not the past 20 to 25-year-old Jay that I was before, and I shouldn't be, you know, brought back to that place that I was at by other peoples that are naysayers or they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. I have to really focus on my accomplishments, because there's moments where I actually sit down and I take a look back on my life and I'm like, holy shit, I was able to do that. I said I was going to do something and I did do it. And I need to focus on not only like giving myself credit, but also keep that same energy, you know, keep on riding that wave, because if I was able to do it back then, who's to say that I can't do a better job going forward?
Right.
So, and you know, a perfect example is podcasting. I know so many people that are in this realm, or they were in this realm and then they stopped. And I told myself I'm not going to stop. I could do this shit until I'm 80. We're at episode 131 right now, guys. There's not a lot of people that I know that could say that.
Yes, sir.
When you're doing it, it's easy for somebody to look at you and say, he should have done this, he should have done that. But you're in the ring.
Right,
You're the one that's taking the risks. You're doing it.
right.
Right? It's easy from the outside to say, I can do this.
Yeah.
I would have done it this way. You're not doing it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So absolutely celebrate those victories, man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Take a victory lap.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you just coined the title of the episode right now, Victory Lap. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours, and we have in you know, behind the camera and stuff like that. But hopefully we could do this again, because I think this is very important for the audience that are watching and listening. I think it was important to get some of these things off of our chest. And I always say that it's always about collaboration, not competition. And I'm actually glad that I was able to orchestrate you three gentlemen to the same room and having such a very raw, real, honest conversation that I think is important. And hopefully that this could, you know, transcend into something beautiful going forward.
We're like the Avengers for mental illness.
I like that. Can I be the Hulk?
Yes, I'm Iron Man.
Absolutely.
Wolverine
I'll take it.
and Captain America.
There
I'll
you
take
go.
Captain America. Yeah, Captain Dominican. There you go.
Captain
All
Platinum.
right.
All right.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. So before we go, individually, starting with Carlos, where can they find you guys on social media?
You can find me at Carlos Financial Coach on Instagram, at Carlos_financial_coach.
All right.
Same thing. On Instagram at DNZ Machado. That's it. And
Hashtag dues paid.
There you go. Hashtag dues paid. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Joel.
You can find me on Instagram on I am Fermetta.
All right. And you can find me, ladies and gentlemen, at I am Jason Enrique on all social media platforms. Don't forget to like, subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning on this episode. Thank you guys again for coming through. Hopefully we could do this again. And yeah, appreciate all the love and support. This has been the First Class Second Place podcast. We out. Good job.